Okay, start again. Sorry.
Hey, remember that time we had dinner in the Las Vegas Mall, and it was all what's the word?
Creepy people.
What?
Creepy people.
Yeah, no. What's the word when you don't want people to know you're doing what you're doing?
Creeping.
Yeah, creeping. We
Yeah.
had I keep wanting to say Clementine, which is obviously not the word.
You should use that word though and make it popular.
Remember that time when we had a Clementine rendezvous in Las Vegas, you and me?
I think you mean clandestine.
Thank you.
Got it.
All right, you can introduce us now if you want.
Okay, for real. I'm Aaron Baker. I'm joined by my co-host, my former colleague, my current buddy, Noah Kravitz. That sounded kind of cool, right?
Yeah, man. Sure. That one guy who winked at you on Twitter probably thought it was cool. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you? How's your week going?
My week's going pretty well. And if for some reason you have the NBA scoreboard up in front of you, don't tell me. My week's going well, except that at record time here, it was halftime of the Warriors-Clippers game, and Warriors not looking so good in the first half. They made a little mini run at the end of the first half, but it was pretty ugly. Aside from that, I'm doing pretty well.
I'm sorry, unless I hear Mavs, I just lose interest.
So I was thinking about making a phone called the Dirk phone. If you had 3 seconds left in the fourth quarter of phones, what kind of... I got a... last week after episode 1, because now we're on episode 2.
Episode 2.
A friend of mine, the next day, I sent him the link, and he was like, I'm not going to listen to this. And then about 10 minutes later, he was like, this is actually hilarious. And I was like, yeah, man. And then a little while later, he said, all right, I made it as far as the Dirk phone, then I had to turn it off.
I love the, if you read the iTunes reviews and a couple of other reviews, it's like, these guys are great. They're super funny and super weird, but it's awesome.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right. You know, some phones, some basketball, some craziness.
All right. So I've got a, oh, right. So you can listen to the podcast here, Unsponsored Content. It's on the iTunes, where it debuted at number 12, which is true, but it was on like some subchart thing. And then I have no idea how they compute these things because the rankings changed wildly.
It was like technology in Oakland and in Dallas. We're number 12.
Exactly. We're also officially submitted to the Google Play podcast thing if they ever launch it, which knowing Google, they probably won't because they're too busy rebooting G Plus again.
Yeah, they'll sunset it in a couple years.
So if anybody out there has suggestions on where to list this thing on Android, it's Android, so it's fragmented. That's just how it is. Drop a line to the crew, the unsponsored crew, unsponsoredcontent@gmail.com, or hit them up on the Twitter. What's the Twitter, Aaron?
It's UnspawnCon, but are we still pretending that we have a staff? Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, send it to UnspawnCon, and the crew will thank you.
Yeah, the crew.
And also, you can listen on the SoundCloud and also on the official Tumblr page that the crew works so hard to keep up to date. All right, let's get to it. Topics for tonight. Topic number 1. I'm gonna set the table, and you're gonna eat the dinner on this one.
Excellent, because you hated this, so I'm ready for it.
Okay. So there's a new Sprint ad going around, the 50% off kid or something like that.
Yeah.
And Sprint running an exciting new promotion, cutting your bill in half, which is actually an old promotion, but they just somehow tweaked it a little bit. So let's talk Sprint. Aaron Baker, what do you think about these ads? And also, let's just talk about Sprint for a second.
Okay, so starting with the ad, I thought the creative was pretty rough, to put it nicely. Like, it was not creative I would go with. I think it was poor taste. But in terms of Sprint, I think that there's still a potential fighting chance for them, which I know you're going to immediately push back on.
Why? Don't be intimidated by me.
Oh, no.
I know. I'm tall and handsome and
bald, yeah,
and worldly, and the head's very shiny. But just
okay, fine. Here's the thing about the ad. The creative was rough. I wish they would be a little bit more punchy with it. I feel like they're still holding back a little bit in the creative. They are trying to be scrappy on one end in the social field and not necessarily being as scrappy in the creative slash marketing slash ad area. So I think it's a little bit of a disconnect, and I think it's the people that like Sprint, the people that are signing up for Sprint are also people that are potentially interested in T-Mobile and like that type of underdog carrier, if you will. And so I think my guess would be that they're more attracted to what T-Mobile's doing with some of the more aggressive promotions, with some of the more aggressive stuff that John Ledger's doing on Twitter. And so I think when you dive into a demographic like that, they're used to the aggressiveness at this point of T-Mobile, and they want to see something similar from Sprint. And I think it's just a little bit of a softball in an increasingly challenging wireless space. What about you?
I wish. I only wish that the BlackBerry Priv had launched on Sprint, not AT&T, so that we could just like send two dead cows out to pasture at the same time with the Priv and Sprint.
I was like, okay, so before you go on, I was like, 90% chance that episode 2 is going to be derailed by more BlackBerry Priv stuff, and it's just going to be another BlackBerry Priv episode.
Nope, I got my jab in there. I'm done. It's interesting what you said about. I was hoping that you would just go full on into those kind of people who shopping for those cheap networks.
No, well, I realize it probably sounded like that. What I meant was like people that are looking for a good deal, but also people that
those kind of
cheap have younger demographics. What?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process, and I actually tried last week, but I was on hold for too long and I had to go. So maybe I'll try again. Maybe not. I don't know. Of switching from AT&T to T-Mobile. And it's 110% not because of John. How do you pronounce his last name? Ledger?
Ledger, yeah.
Yeah. I would be happy if I never heard from that guy again. The whole reason switching is because it's cheaper. And they run GSM. And where I live, in a pretty urban area, folks I know who have them get performance on par with AT&T, which is what I have now. I would not even consider Sprint because, like, why am I going to buy a CDMA phone? How's that going to? I guess like the iPhones these days. And some of the other phones, they're all like kind of baked into one. But my point, all the one phone, and if it's unlocked, you can use it across, CDMA or GSM in the U.S. Not all the phones, but some of the phones. But my point just being that like Sprint, not only did they get taken over by not only are they number 4 now. Not only in the battle of the annoying, loudmouth, low-rent CEOs are they losing, but also, like their network has not been good for a long, long time, and they're still trying to play catch-up to just technology-wise, let alone coverage-wise. And they're fighting battles on so many fronts. And sure, Verizon has been a CDMA network for a long time, but they're winning, so that's okay. And I see no reason why anybody would want to move to Sprint over T-Mobile unless they happen to be in. So what my understanding is, one of the very, very few places in the U.S. where Sprint's network is comparable.
Kansas City.
So, right. Yeah. I don't like the ad. I don't, this whole like 50% off kid thing. Hasn't that promotion been running for like a year and a half? And the deal is just...
I mean, they ran it last year around the same time. The trick is, like, if you look at the fine print, they will agree to half regular rate plans, but the challenge with like a T-Mobile, for example, is they're constantly launching these quote promotional rate plans. So it's like they may do one for Christmas where it's like 4 lines for $80, and that one wouldn't qualify under the current terms and conditions.
Right.
And so it's that kind of stuff. And it's funny you mentioned T-Mobile. Like that's one of the bigger challenges I have, because I thought the same thing about switching. I use AT&T currently. Thought about switching to T-Mobile. Love what they're doing from an international standpoint, offering for international calls and texts and 2G data. But the challenge I have
Do you
with
travel abroad a lot?
I less now in my current job, but I like to pretend like I'm still important enough to
All right.
travel.
No, I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I do. What do you
Yeah,
mean?
sure. I'm going to Bangladesh tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm going to Singapore next week for travel. I think the challenge with that I have with T-Mobile mentally is I feel like they're always launching deals, and like not that's necessarily on the surface a bad thing. It's just like they're launching them to the point that I can't keep up with them. So it's like we have 10 iterations of Uncarrier, and we have these 37 promotional offers that are running, and it's like I can very easily look at like a Verizon or an AT&T and say, here are their plans that they're offering. Here's what they're doing. They may do like one a year, but it's like the T-Mobile November deal, get 4 lines for $86 a month, and like. I think that creates a huge disconnect. Like people, by the time you know the plan, you think about switching. They've either made a cheaper plan or a different plan, or they've expired it, or it expires in 2017 if you sign up for a year. Like there's just too much going on.
I'd be curious to know if that's, and I don't mean this disparagingly. When I'm disparaging you, I'll just be straight up about it. I'd be curious to know if that's actually a thing for consumers, or if it's just that you're in something of a special minority where you're following this stuff. Because I'm what are they up to, like Uncarrier 11 or something? I agree, it's stupid, but at the same time, I also I'm aware of that, but I've paid kind of zero attention to it except for having little spasms on Twitter when I happen to be on when they're announcing something. Paid no attention to it until we were like, hey, let's look into. Until the new iPhone came out. And we were like, oh, I wonder if we could switch somewhere, and get the new iPhones without having to pay anything. And, oh, I wonder what T-Mobile's offering. And so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of it is, you're right. I mean, we do follow it. So I definitely follow it closer than anybody else. But I think maybe it's on us to let people know. Like, I think, for example, like somebody in my family that signs up may not realize that some of their promotional deals, they last for a year and they expire. And for some people, that may be fine. Maybe you go to a different plan or you move on after the year's up and you deal with promotional costs.
It's hard to move on when you're incarcerated. You don't have a lot of options.
Incarcerated to carrier, or is this a...
No, you were referencing somebody in your family, so I just kind of figured...
Oh, excellent. I don't even remember how it was like late one night in San Francisco 5 or 6 years ago.
It was in Oakland. Sorry. It was in Oakland. Stop referring to where I live in San Francisco. I'm tired of it.
I think it's San Fran, right?
Time to move on. Time to move on to the next topic.
Just to be clear, while you're moving on, no one in my family has been incarcerated. Just for anyone that's listening, it is a joke.
We're putting loose time limits on things. So question number 2 actually came to us via the Twitters. You can tweet at us at UnspawnCon, U-N-S, how do you spell it? S-P-O-N-C-O-N. Like unsponsored content. That's too long of a name. So it's UnspawnCon. This came via Andrew Cam, who, if memory serves, well, no, we haven't actually disclosed our histories, so never mind. Kayfabe only. What's the greatest phone you ever owned, considering what it offered at the time?
It's funny. We talked about doing this question, and I'm still on the fence as to what my favorite one is. What about you? You go first.
All right, I'll go first. Well, I have 2 answers, because, of course, what good's a question without 2 answers? And the 2 answers are the Nokia 5310 and the Sony Ericsson W800i.
Both good phones.
And these are the reasons why. The W800i is a more straightforward answer, and it's also less, what's the word I'm looking for? Less of me being a jerk in answering the question. That phone was the first phone I ever had that allowed me to use my own earphones to listen to music. And back in the day, I used to get really upset that the phone makers couldn't see fit to spend an extra 25 cents to put a standard headphone jack in their phones. But before that was a thing, the W800i, I got it, speaking of T-Mobile, signed up for a T-Mobile plan through this little shop in Berkeley, which is no longer there.
In San Fran?
What's that?
In San Fran?
Uh-huh. And you could sign up for a plan, and they had all the cool import phones, because this is back when the U.S. didn't have the good phones. And so my wife got a Samsung slider. I forget the name of it, but it had a little camera on top that swiveled, so you could take a selfie or you could turn it. But it wasn't called a selfie back then. And I got the W800i, and it was a candy bar phone, and it had this like crazy dongle that you'd plug into the bottom, and then you had to plug your headphones into that, and it was just a mess sticking out of my pocket. But I could use like my own headphones with it, and it sounded really good. So that was exciting.
Sidebar though, did it have a lanyard hole?
Probably, yeah.
Nice.
No, I didn't look for those as much as you. You were probably more aware of those than I was for various reasons. But, lanyard hole. And then the other one, the 5310, the deal with that was the last phone. That phone represents my last, like, clinging on to the hope that I could avoid being hopelessly addicted to my smartphone for the rest of my life. That's the phone that I used when I was like, I gotta put the iPhone away, whatever. It was the first iPhone or second iPhone at the time, I forget, and just like simplify. And that phone was tiny, it was thin, and it had a real headphone jack. And I was like, you know what? Actually, all I want my phone to do is make calls, send text messages, and listen to music. And, that probably lasted like 2 weeks before I went back.
It was a good 2 weeks. It was quiet 2 weeks.
It was a nice, quiet 2 weeks, yeah.
Man, I don't know. So the one that keeps coming up, I feel like I need to do like one dumb phone and one smartphone. So the dumb phone for me would probably be the Motorola V710. I absolutely love that phone. And I would preface it by saying like all of the Motorola phones in that time period I loved. So like obviously the Razr, the V3 was like the one in 2004, and then there was the V710.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
Yeah, the V710 was the Mac Daddy. I don't know if people still say that, but it was the Mac Daddy. I absolutely loved massive LCD screen on the outside. You could change the wallpaper on both the screen itself and then on the external screen. It was amazing. The buttons were kind of funky in terms of the way that they were configured. That phone brings back some good memories.
Yeah.
And then I gotta think like
2004.
Was it 2004? Has it been that long?
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, and the V3 too, because like I feel like that all those Motorola phones kind of launched around the same time. So it's like that one, the V710, the V810, if I'm not mistaken, on some regional carriers.
So the V710 was posted to phonearena.com February 12th, 2004. It had a 176 by 220 TFT display with 262,000 colors. What was that? Was that 16-bit color, 8-bit color? I don't remember.
I never do math. But yeah, I loved that phone.
Yep.
It was an amazing phone. And then smartphone, I don't know. Let me think. I have to go back and say like maybe the Evo 4G all around. I loved that phone too.
You always had a soft spot for Dan Hesse.
I did have, Dan Hesse. You remember that, like all the Sprint events we covered where I was like, I just want to meet that guy and have a beer with him.
A friend of mine, friend of yours too, but I'm not going to tell you who on the air, texted me about a week ago from an event and said, so I just looked across the room and there's Dan Hesse eating a steak.
And did he say, does Aaron know?
No, I just I said really, and then I was sent a picture, and then I said something like, does he have a job now? What does he do now? And nobody.
A couple of awards, I think.
Nobody knew.
Yeah, I would love that. I just remember the time that we did all those press conferences, and then the Steve Ballmer ones are always fun. Good memories.
Was the Evo? I'm trying to remember if it was the Evo or not, where Sprint. It was a Sprint phone, and Sprint had this event where I was just going to say the most useless thing ever in this conversation, which was this event where like everything was yellow and they were talking about speed.
Really?
Yeah, I know. It's narrows it down. They had this event at CES or CTIA, and they launched, the new phone and like the Now network, I think it was, and whatever, everything's so fast and amazing. And their thing was they were talking about how like their network was now so fast, their 4G was so fast that you could do live video calls. And so they had a call during their keynote thing. They had like a big screen set up, and they did a video call with Mario Batali, and Mario Batali was like cooking for them and showing how you cook something.
That wasn't. That was for the Sprint Overdrive because I was with you at that event.
Overdrive. Okay. Yeah.
That's the hotspot.
And then they dropped the curtain, and then actually he was there, and
and I took pictures of you with him, and you had your hand up, if you remember.
Yo, they are good memories, man.
They are good memories. So the thing I loved about that phone, and I'm of course tying it back into Sprint. No, I'm just kidding. The thing I loved about that phone was it was kind of the rise of the phablet Android device. Think about it. It was a 4-inch display. It was the rise, if you will, of 4G, even though it was WiMAX. Like, it was a pioneer in many ways in its time, which I thought was pretty cool.
Isn't that funny how you said it was the rise of a phablet with a 4.3-inch display?
It's 4.3, that's right.
And if that launched now, like, Android fans would get their knickers in a twist. Like, this is a tiny little phone for tiny little people, tiny, tiny, tiny. I mean, probably iPhone fans would do that as well. I don't mean it like that. I just mean, in today's day and age, like 4.3 is,
Yeah. I just remember it being so popular and like I remember thinking, this is a huge screen. How am I going to handle this big phone?
It was huge.
Yeah.
June 4th, 2010.
Crazy.
I was using yesterday on my commute home. I take the bus home, and I was listening to a tape of an interview for work and taking some notes on the interview to prepare to write a story. And so I was doing it on my 6 Plus, and I was thinking about our conversation last week. The phablet size, I never talk on that phone, like literally never. But that size is so good for doing certain kinds of work. Like typing with 2 thumbs on that size phone is it's noticeably easier than on, my comparison is my iPhone 6, which is 4.7. The 5.5, like I can type with 2 thumbs and I just make fewer mistakes. And I just feel like, oh, this is working. And I'm listening to a call and I'm taking notes while I'm listening to the call. And the technology just kind of fades away a little bit into the background as opposed to like, oh, I have to keep going back and erasing or just ignore autocorrect or whatever. Like it's a good size for getting stuff done.
It is. I think the challenge that I have with like the iPhone 6s Plus is when you get to that screen size, I feel like you need to have things in the software to be able to really utilize that screen size. And this is one area like Android OEMs aside, I think Samsung has done an incredible job with the Galaxy Note series. It's like there's actually useful things you can do with the size of the screen. You can multitask. You can move the screen around. You can make applications smaller. You can do a ton of stuff from the device itself as opposed to like just being magnified.
What is that? Multitask. Well, you got some echo going there.
You what now?
There's some echo going.
Oh, can you hear me now?
But can you hear me echoing? Okay, there we go. What does that mean, though, multitasking? I mean, I know what it means technically, but like, do you actually have 2 windows open and you're referencing them both simultaneously?
When I've carried a Note device, I've done it several times for work stuff, where it's like there's a link in an email where I need to check the website, and it's just easier to open up both and try to hold them both on the same screen as opposed to going back and forth between the apps.
Okay, fair enough.
But it's like, I love the screen size. It's just, there are certain devices, the 6S Plus is kind of guilty of this. The other big screen devices over the years have been guilty, where it's like they just make the device bigger and don't really add any software value adds.
Oh, no, totally. But I was just curious if like people actually use the multitasking, and I'm not saying you don't. I'm just curious. I've started doing it a little bit with, the iOS 9 or 9.1 or whatever offers it now, but it's a very skinny window. I only use it like if I'm like in the evenings. A lot of times I'll be doing something on the phone because I'm addicted to it, and that's the theme of tonight's episode is that I'm. That's it. That's what the brain is. My phone has done to my brain. It's mush. I'm addicted. I'll get a text message, and it's nice to be able to pull a little skinny window in there to reply to the message. But also, it's like, nah. All right, next question.
Yeah.
Uh,
Moto E.
Is that the next question, the Moto E?
Yeah. So obviously it dropped $20 at Walmart, and then there's a ton of different lower cost devices. There's like the LG Sunrise. There's a couple of other ones that are between the $10 to $20 price point. Is it worth
$10 right now? Yeah.
Is it $10? I think it's $9.99, right?
I don't know. I didn't actually go to the store and buy one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But does it matter? That's the question.
That it's $9.99 versus 10? No, it's not. You're being pedantic.
Well, I'm just saying pennies are still valuable.
Maybe in Texas.
Hey, pennies are awesome.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, maybe in San Fran.
It's interesting. I was doing a little research about the whole Sprint thing, just making sure that I was standing by my fold them up. And, it'll be interesting to see what their fourth quarter earnings are, because their third quarter earnings, they reported an overall gain in subscribers, but like a lot of those were prepaid subscribers who'd gotten their credit up high enough to transfer into postpaid, and their churn rate was back, higher than it had been, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. But the point of all that was the thing that their CEO said about, the Boost Mobile customers who kind of graduated to Sprint, and they got their credit up high enough so they could go to Sprint. And he said, the big thing is, like, they were really frustrated that they couldn't get the high-end smartphones. And those are the phones that everybody wants, clearly. Now, the U.S., and I'm allowed to say this because I'm American, the U.S. is all about living beyond your means and racking up insane debts and spending foolishly and going bankrupt enough times that you're allowed to run for president. So I wonder how much of that is a phenomenon that is somewhat unique to the United States versus in these, whatever the word is people are using these days, these so-called developing markets, emerging markets, where, right now, the majority of people literally can't afford, like there is no credit option. They can't get a credit card and overextend themselves even to pay for a Galaxy S or S6 or an iPhone or whatever. So the super cheap phone is their only option, and it's also their only way of getting onto the internet. And so for places like that, I think a phone like the Moto E, I've long thought that the Moto E, the Moto G are incredible for what they offer at the price point that they offer. But more appealing, like to me when I'm on the internet and like, oh, I'm going to give up my iPhone and get one of these because it's so cheap, and then I don't because I'm spoiled. But in these other markets, these low-cost phones is where the action's at. It's very meaningful culturally and economically, and it's where the growth is happening for the hardware makers right now. But I wonder if somebody went into wherever parts of India, or I think you're seeing it a little bit in China with Apple, that the chunk of the average Chinese person's salary that it costs to buy an iPhone, right? The percentage of the monthly income is so much higher than it is in the United States, but people are still buying them. So I wonder, the whole point is saying, like, in America, does a $10 Android phone matter that much? Not like on a large scale.
Yeah, I don't know. I struggle with that one a little bit too. What I think, like when I hear us talking about it, is my thought is it's a great device for like older people that are moving from a flip phone that like want a smartphone but don't want to spend a ton of money because it's their first smartphone. They're coming from an older device. It's a grandfather that doesn't use the internet.
No. This is where I'm going to talk about being older than you. I have, of 4 generation older than me relatives who I'm very close to, 3 of them have iPhones and 1 has an Android phone.
I love that your iPhone just chimed. It was like, this is sponsored by iPhone.
Yeah, totally. three of them have iPhones, and the fourth has an Android phone. And the one with the Android phone has far more problems. Android phones are not for, and especially not a low end Android phone with a 3.5-inch screen. Those phones are not for older people moving to a smartphone for the first time, unless you're advocating some kind of twisted form of assisted suicide, Aaron, which is not cool.
Hey, that's words in my mouth, son.
No, I hear your point. I definitely, but I'd maybe flip it around and say, like, for a kid getting their first smartphone, and you don't want to spend a lot of money because the kid's going to pick his nose with it and then drop it in the toilet.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were talking about this part, where with you being older than me. I guess I'll talk about it, from being better looking than you. I think overall, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know how old your older relatives are. I'm just saying I have very, very recent personal experience with one older relative who, like, half the time after we've had a conversation, I'll get pocket dialed by that person because they don't successfully hang up their Android phone on a regular basis.
See, it's funny. There are 3 people that I can think of off the top of my head in our family that have Android devices that are like mid-range to low-end. And I think the thing is they don't use them for internet or things that would cause like a slowdown. They're using it for the bigger display because they can't see.
The bigger display, right. And these phones we're talking about have tiny displays.
Right, but coming from a flip phone, I'm saying.
So it still seems bigger to them.
It still seems bigger to them. So, I mean, that's their perspective. Now,
right.
Obviously, there are plenty of other devices out there, right? And I think that, in my mind, that's where they like it, is they don't have to put on their glasses as much, or they don't have to, squint at the display as much. It's just for the big display when it comes to dialing or when it comes to text messaging. I helped most of them get their font size larger so they can see text messages better. But none of the 3 that I'm thinking of, none of them use it actively for like email or internet uses or apps or anything like that.
Right. I was waiting in line for my bus home. Or no, I was waiting in line this morning for the carpool. I take carpool into work in the mornings. And the gentleman standing next to me had his BlackBerry Bold out, and I thought of you.
Oh, man, that was a good phone.
Yeah.
Bold 1000?
I assume. Yeah, I don't know. I remember, that was a great phone. And I remember, like, seriously debating if I wanted that or an iPhone at the time.
It's almost as great as the BlackBerry Pro.
I was thinking about it, and for the longest time, I was waiting for, after I got on the iPhone train, which I got off of for a while, and I got on the HTC Android train for a little while. And then I took a detour onto the Windows Phone. What do you call a slow, broken down train?
I don't know why this came into my head, but this has nothing to do with trains. But that Annie Lennox song, Walking on Broken Glass, is what came to mind.
Yeah, then I walked on some broken glass with. But yeah, I remember for the longest time, like waiting for somebody to come out with a good physical keyboard attachment for the iPhone. And I just kept thinking, or like when the iPhone first came out and it didn't have landscape mode keyboard for all the apps. It was limited to like, it was kind of random, I remember. And like you couldn't use it on email or messaging or something key. And just like waiting for that and thinking like, well, that's clearly the way to use this phone is in horizontal, landscape mode. It really needs a physical keyboard and blah, blah. And now I'm the guy just packing in BlackBerry.
I was going to say, have you considered a BlackBerry Pro?
I thought about it for a minute.
But then you listened to Unsponsored Content, episode 1.
Hey, speaking of which, tell the people what they're listening to. And then we'll go into the lightning round.
Wait, you're listening to Unsponsored Content, of course, with Aaron Baker and Noah Kravitz. It's Aaron C. Baker on Twitter, Noah Kravitz on Twitter, and UnspawnCon. Is that voice still creepy?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, you have the advantage of being 2 hours behind me, too, so it's not as late there.
Your voice would probably only be creepier to me if it was 11:53 here.
Well, we're in the morning.
Let's get to the lightning round. It's late where you are.
Let's do it.
All right.
Lightning, thunder.
You ask me first.
Alrighty. So, should we set up the lightning round, or do you think people know?
No, go ahead. Set it up for him, Aaron Baker.
Okay, so let me think here. It's lightning round time. Okay, boom. Question one. If you weren't an iPhone, what smartphone would you use and why?
If I was not on an iPhone,
Yeah, what would you use and why?
I would use a. Oh, the first phone that came to mind was a Galaxy S6 Edge because the curved screen is sexy.
Nice.
And
Not Plus, though. The Edge, the regular one?
yeah, the Plus is too big for me. Even though what I said before about the larger size being nice for doing work, like most of the time I don't do work. So, hey, bosses, if you're listening, just kidding. Yeah, the S6 Edge. I like that Samsung has dramatically reduced the amount of touch bloat that they put on there. And I think that the curved edges of the screen are very sexy. I like it. It's sexy. Um, my other consideration would be the Note 5 because even though it's ginormous, but I wouldn't really. I always think like it's like with the iPad Pro. I think like, oh, I want the stylus. I can't draw, so yeah. I guess I'd probably go with an S6.
Okay. S6 Edge, you mean, right?
S6 Edge. Sorry, yeah. I don't. I'd want it like, because with the Nexus you get the updates faster. But how big? The current Nexus is giant though. Let's just say X. Yeah,
it's 5.7 inch display.
You know what? This is a lightning round. This is not Noah keep talking round. Okay, Aaron Baker. This one comes from the Twitters from I am Steve Ako. Steve Ako. I don't know how you pronounce that, but thanks, Steve.
Steve Ako?
Steve Ako. Steve, yeah. Tempered glass screen protectors. Thoughts?
So I have a funny story in the lightning round with this. I have one of my iPhone 6s Plus, and it worked great for about a month. And then I noticed small cracks at the bottom. And when I was trying to investigate those cracks, a giant crack, I moved the display or moved the panel a little bit, and a crack is now up my screen on the protector, not on the screen itself.
Okay.
So I'm inclined to say I don't like them.
But that's the whole point, is that the crack is on the protector, not the screen.
Right, but I can take pictures and upload these to our social media channels because it's worth seeing. It's like small cracks at the bottom. It's not something that you would ever see on a screen. It's like that it got cold all of a sudden, or like it was like subject to different temperatures or something. It's very weird.
No, I understand. Yeah, mine's kind of a mess. I know this is your question, but I like to talk. I use them.
You don't say.
I'm a big fan. I like them a lot, and I like the fact that it gets cracked and chipped up and stuff, and then eventually I'm like, oh, all right, I'll spend another $5 and get a new one.
Are you saying you like yourself or tempered glass?
Okay, go ahead. Next question.
Boom. How big is too big when it comes to displays? Do you like a big honking display or a tiny, tiny display?
Is there something in the middle?
Well,
yeah. Is that all this country is about anymore? Big honking and tiny, tiny?
Well, what's your definition of middle? To me, middle is 5 inches.
No, 5 inches is giant.
So you would say like your ideal is like, I don't want to put words in your mouth because I like to talk too. So 4.6.
I mean,
7.
I'm tempted to say my ideal is 4.3, but I've gotten used to the 4.7. Probably my all-time favorite phone from an industrial design standpoint only was the HTC One S, which was before they launched the the One, what people know as the One, the M7, M8, M9. They had the One S and the One X, and the One S was 4.3, and it was super thin and had this really nice like machined aluminum, although they had some made up fancy process for that. Oh, it's laser constructed by the extrusion of liquid metallurgy, and then we pour vodka on it. But I really like that phone, and that was 4.3. But yeah, like I said, the 5.5 I think is nice as a secondary thing that I never have in my pocket. But 4.7's getting, if there's something bigger than 4.7 that I'd like day to day, it's not going to be too much bigger.
So let me ask you, and I know this is a lightning round, but we both like to talk, and this is important follow-up. I have to ask. the 1S, there's comparisons that are being drawn between it and the 1A9. And before you stop me and say, hey, but the 1A9 has a big display, from a bezel standpoint, it's almost exactly the same size as the 1S. Would you consider it, even though it has 5-inch display?
The 1A9, is that the new HTC that looks exactly like an iPhone?
That is the new HTC device, yeah.
Would I consider it now? No, because it runs Android.
Okay. So back to my previous, if you weren't using iPhone, would you consider using it?
If I wasn't, sure, I'd consider it. I haven't actually, I haven't used it. So, but yeah, I mean, it looks lovely.
I'm realizing that I just got a little cray or with the lightning round. Or cray, is it one cray or two crays? Whatever. With the lightning round, I got off track there. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think anybody who
knows us
is bothering to listen to this podcast understands what's going to happen.
To the 7 people watching, listening, thank you.
So, how big is the screen on this? Because I'm looking at these internet web pages and I can't find it.
This section is sponsored.
Ding! 5.0 inches. Yeah, I would check it out.
It's tricky because like bezels have gotten so much smaller, so it sounds bigger, but like size-wise, it's almost exactly the same size.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, that's nice. Have them send me one. No, because the reason, and the reason that I'm using an iPhone is not. I mean, I do think it's easier to use, and so I think there is an advantage for first-time smartphone users and other folks who might be, less facile with portable electronic devices. But for me, I switched back to it out of peer pressure because I have 2 kids, and all the people in my life who were sharing photos of the kids all were on iOS. And I literally started getting left off of messages because having a non-iOS device in the thread would mess up the picture for everybody else. Instead of getting a nice big full screen picture, and get these little thumbnails, and it was even worse if it was a video clip. And so finally I was like, forget it, I'm going back. So when I keep saying this, like, oh, I won't use it because it's not an iPhone, it's not some kind of, you get the idea. All right, is the Nexus 5 still a good buy at $150 US or 114 British Imperial Pounds? Via F1 Alan W on the Twitters.
So shout out to the British crowd. I think it's I do. I mean, are you asking it from a question of a replacement device or like a brand new device?
Is it still a good buy, Governor?
Yeah, I think it's still, there was one time at a bar I said that. I was like, hello, Governor. They don't like that very much. So my apologies to the gentleman I said that to. I think you were there. It was 2010 in London. Maybe you were there with me. I don't know. Anyway, I think as a replacement device, it's great. I think as an Android test device, it's great for like running stock Android. It's $150. It's a decent deal. It's worth having as a second device or weekend device or a want to get away occasionally an Android device to go back to my iPhone on Monday.
Wait, what is a weekend device? You're going to change phones for the weekend? There's a contingent
of people that like using a different device on the weekends because they're roughing around at Target and want to use a different device. I'm not one of these people.
Sorry, they're doing what now?
They're roughing around at Target.
At Target.
I think it's people that
So you're saying from the answer to this question, I'm inferring that you're saying that all British people are hooligans who pick fights at family stores. Ergo, they should use cheap Android phones.
I think that's a safe assumption. Yeah.
All right. So $150. Good buy, not a good buy.
No, it's definitely a good buy. And so I think it's also a good buy for anybody that likes playing with stock Android. Like, it's going to be a device that's going to get stock Android updates for a reasonable period of time. So instead of buying like an Nexus 6P at $500 or $499 and up,
right,
you can buy one for $150 and play with it.
Yeah. All right. So we have
my turn. Last but not least.
Yeah, we set up all these rules for ourselves, and we have to at least come in a little bit shorter than last week. So
okay, just say yes or no. What do you think of Wi-Fi first carriers like Project Fi?
No.
Okay, done.
Are
we shorter than last week?
I think it's great if you can have Wi-Fi everywhere you go. And I think we're not there yet for 99% of the people who'd be interested.
Okay.
Remember, what was that one company called? Who they were going to revolutionize everything with their
01 Mobile.
Thank you.
I still have the pin.
I didn't want to say that gentleman's name out loud because that might be construed as. Okay, next question. Could you see Samsung ever breaking away from Android completely to embrace Tizen? And that comes to us from our good friend of the podcast, Don Brewer.
Never say never. I'm going. Don Brewer, represent. What's up, man? Do people still say represent? I'm getting sidetracked. I don't imagine them ever completely switching away from Android, but I could see them, depending on the market, using either Android or Tizen. I don't think it's a U.S. thing, but I think for emerging markets and for cheap devices, yeah.
All right.
Are we still under time? Did we beat it?
Echo.
Did we beat it?
We did. Yeah, no, we beat it. We're at about 45 and a half minutes now. We clocked in about 55 last week.
Excellent. One day we'll get to 30 minutes.
One day.
Yeah, I think you should do the sign off.
Well, next week's Thanksgiving, so we have to figure out if we want to do this.
Oh yeah.
Because you're not gonna make it till midnight Thanksgiving night, my friend. I know you.
Yeah, I'm kind of crazy like that. Maybe we do it Tuesday night.
All right, we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
And to everybody who wrote in, and by everybody I mean like one person, complaining about the audio quality, I have two things to say to you. Number one, you're right. Number two, actually three things to say to you. Number one, you're right. Number two, your suggestions were terrible. And I mean that. I followed the link you sent me. Useless. Try again, buddy. Number three, Aaron C. Baker and I are aware of the situation, and we are exploring options or possibilities, avenues we can travel down to rectify the situation. But as of now, they all require too much manual labor. So until we get venture funding, do a Kickstarter to create radio-controlled drones, raise money, and then, quote, fold the company. I don't know. We'll have to figure something else out. But we're aware, and
all the way.
We want to deliver you a quality audio experience.
Am I helping?
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time, thanks. This has been Unsponsored Content, episode number 2, with Aaron Baker and me. You can follow us on the Twitters at UnspawnCon. Aaron, you do this. You're better at this than I am. Go ahead.
Well, you can follow UnspawnCon at UnspawnCon on Twitter. I want to do it in the creepy voice. Unsponsored Content is on Twitter at UnspawnCon. I'm on Twitter, Aaron C. Baker. Noah's on Twitter at Noah Kravitz. This has been Unsponsored Content, episode 2. We'll see you next time.